Good morning. First of all, a confession. I'm the person whose mic was hot. You heard whispering back there. Sorry. I want to say thank you to the Chamber and to Northrop Grumman for bringing me here to share my story with such an amazing group of women. I could feel the buzz in the room as you all were getting ready for this, and this is the kind of group that I want armed with some of my hard-earned lessons. So, I am going to share with you how I overcame what I call the tyranny of the no's. No, you won't be a newspaper reporter. No, you won't be a foreign correspondent. No, you're too old and you don't quite have the right look to be a TV correspondent. And once, when I was a TV correspondent and was hit by a car bomb, no, you'll probably never walk or run normally again. And finally, after I got back to work, no, you will not be allowed back in a war zone. I learned to first, look, when you hear no's like that, your first reaction is anger, resentment. And what I learned was to quickly get through that stage to understanding, what are they telling me with that no? There are secrets in there. There's information I can use to turn that no into a yes, and then act on it. So I'm going to tell you my improbable career course, starting with being a young college grad from Wellesley. I had a purple mohawk, been a human rights activist, and marched against the Reagan administration. The FBI, I'm sure, had a file on me. The DOJ now has a file on me, but that's another story. So I was, for the first year out of college, an intern overseas in Israel and trying to get my start as a young writer. Now, I didn't end up writing for anyone important, but it was the time of the first Intifada, and I got a couple of clips. I got back to Washington, D.C., and thought, that's it, I'm going to get hired by the Washington Post. I could not get into the door of the Washington Post. So I got a job with a newsletter covering energy. And I soon started beating the reporter at the Washington Post on all the energy stories. Okay, it took about a year. And he called me into his office once after a press conference. He said, come visit me at the Post. And I was like, yes, I've been noticed. I'm going to get hired. Reporters don't hire reporters, as I was to learn. So Tom called me in, sat me down, he said, look around the room. It's full of 40-year-olds, you're in your 20s. This is a dead men's shoes situation. The whole business is contracting. None of these people are going anywhere. And also, you're being published on the wrong type of paper. It's not newsprint. We're snobs. We only hire people who are newspaper reporters. And look around Washington, D.C. It's full of a lot of smart, young, determined people like you. You got to do something to differentiate yourself from all of them. You got to go back to school or go overseas. Now, being an overachiever who's a little bit insecure, I decided, well, I would have to do both. I told my mom, and her reaction was, honey, you can't quit this job. When are you ever going to make $30,000 a year again? Thanks, Mom. And to my foreign editor, or my publisher who I was working for at the time, he's like, you're one of my lead reporters. Why would you give up this job? And besides, there are no foreign stringer positions overseas anymore. You won't get work. Well, I went to school. I bartended my way through a master's at UVA. I applied for a grant from my old alma mater, Wellesley, and got $10,000 to start me out in Cairo, Egypt, as a foreign correspondent. I landed in Cairo with one little piece of paper saying that I was a stringer for Monitor Radio, which now no longer exists. I had only filed for WZLY radio before that. That's the 10-watt station on the Wellesley College campus. It extends for about like 2 miles. I used to tremble when I filed, but I needed the money. I was so worried about money running out in Egypt that I used to take the bus. It costs about 6 cents. You hop on and off when it gets stuck in traffic, because it doesn't stop for passengers. So I started writing for the Middle East Times. It was the only thing in the city that was being published in English. Other American journalists saw, oh, look, an American journalist here who we don't have to fly over here. All the bureau chiefs were like, ah, we can hire her to backfill us so we can go on vacation. So within 2 months, I was working for CBS Radio, Voice of America, the Baltimore Sun, the San Francisco Chronicle, and, wait for it, the Washington Post. So, 2 months in, I had the front page story, the lead, because Arafat had come to town to start talking peace. I placed one of those expensive $30 overseas phone calls from a 5-star hotel, figuring, you know, I'll indulge myself, I need this. I called my old publisher, who I knew on New Year's morning would be recovering from the night before, so I made sure to call nice and early. Sir, hey, go out to your front porch. Look at the Washington Post, lead section. Happy New Year, click. It was a great day. From then, I ended up in London working for CBS Radio, BBC World Service, and I ended up getting sent into foreign locales where CBS TV didn't have the money to send someone. That's how I ended up in Hainan Island covering the spy plane crash. One of my first major live shots into the Dan Rather Evening News show, and I was like, I've got exclusive information, this is the start of my TV career. I was a radio correspondent, however, and in retrospect I realized I looked like a radio correspondent. So these live shot positions, that when you've got a rent-a-crew that you're using with a satellite dish, they're often on an elevated position like the 13th floor of a hotel. That's where this one was. Guess what happens with the wind on the 13th floor? Kind of blows upward. So guess what my hair was doing? You know, Heat Miser from that after-school, you know, Christmas special? All of my hair was like, it was like I had a mohawk again. And I hear in my earpiece, Dan's like, Kimberly, your hair. I look at the cameraman, I'm like, something up with my hair? And he's like, yeah, you could say it's up. So I look around, I got no hairspray, I'm a radio correspondent. And I'm like, wait a minute. Every cameraman I know, almost like every guy I know, always has one thing, duct tape. I saw some duct tape, give me the tape. With 15 seconds to air, I taped the back of my head. So a television correspondent's career is born. I was invited to take a position in Jerusalem as a hybrid, working for the affiliates and the network. That's how I ended up a couple years later, literally driving Dan Rather into Baghdad. Now, this was a stupid trip. In retrospect, we all admit it. It was the day Baghdad had fallen, in 2003. We were unembedded. Our single security guy was unarmed. We were driving in 5 white 4-wheel drive vehicles down a long road between Jordan and Baghdad, past Fallujah and Ramadi, sharing the road with Saddam loyalists who were fleeing US airstrikes in white 4-wheel drive vehicles. We had an infrared strobe on the top of one of our vehicles, so every couple miles we would phone in and let NATO know where we were. I was later to find out from an Air Force officer that, like, all the way up to the highest offices of the Pentagon, they were saying, where's Dan, where's Dan? And they were tracking our little infrared strobe. Because as much as the White House hated Dan Rather at the time, they did not want to be responsible for taking him out in an airstrike. And for that, thank you, Dan. So, covered the war for 6 weeks. Our affiliate station in New York said, you got to get back to Jerusalem in your regular job. We got back. We'd been awake for 6 weeks. My cameraman had a fever. We were just at the end of our rope. Phone rings, midnight, like 6 hours after we've gotten back to our respective homes. There's been a suicide bombing in Tel Aviv at an American pub. You got to get there. So, call my Australian cameraman, and after the requisite, 2 minutes of swearing, no, Chris, we got to go. He picks me up, we drive, we race to Tel Aviv, and we chase an ambulance. We don't know our way around Tel Aviv, and we figure the ambulance is going to the site of the suicide bombing attack. Well, ambulances can ignore stoplights. We really shouldn't have. Halfway through an intersection, we hit another car, flipped on our side, skidded 30 feet, glasses flying up into Chris's face from the tarmac below. I'm hanging suspended into space. Our television equipment has flung between the two of us into the windshield, just missing my head by inches. And we finally come skidding to a stop, maybe 4 or 5 feet from this massive lamppost. And we come to a stop. I look at Chris, you know, I'm like hanging in space. He's down there. You good? Yeah, I'm good. Okay, yeah, we're fine. The Israelis around the scene pried us out of the top of the vehicle. After a couple of hours of dealing with the accident and the tow truck, et cetera, I called the New York station. Hey, we were in a bad accident. The car is totaled. We're both physically okay, but we're really shaken up. They're like, okay, great, but we need you live in an hour. It was 5 a.m. They needed us live like 6 a.m. For the first time, I was like, I'm going to be a good manager. I'm going to take care of my team, and my team is Chris, who's like white as a sheet, and I'm white as a sheet, and no, I'm sorry, we can't do that live shot, I tell them. We were fired 8 hours later, the moment the boss woke up. So I call CBS London, the old bureau chief I used to work for as a radio correspondent. Hey, sir, so just got canned. Do you have any work for me at the network by any chance? He thinks about it. He's like, you know, the war in Iraq is over, but we're going to keep that bureau open for at least another 6 months. Do you want the job? I'm like, well, yeah, I think I would like the job. He calls Dan. Dan, I think probably out of guilt. Oh, that's the woman I almost got killed. Right, okay, sure, give her the job. Thus, a network television correspondent's career is born. I started my 3-year stint in Baghdad, 6 weeks in, 2 weeks out, initially on the air 7 nights a week, 7 mornings a week. But as the war wore on, it wore on the American public. There was image fatigue. If you put this story on the air at that time, we could see instantly people would change the channel in that top crucial 3 minutes of the broadcast. So it got harder and harder for me to come up with ways to make the story interesting. It was also getting more dangerous. They started kidnapping Iraqis, then they started kidnapping foreigners, and then, you know, anyone who looked like us, journalists, especially traveling like we had to, cameraman, soundman, producer, correspondent, et cetera. So the people I was with the day we were attacked, Paul Douglas and James Brolin, they were the old team that I had worked with when I was a young radio correspondent. I trusted them implicitly. And the night before Memorial Day of 2006, I was like, guys, so here's the shoot. We've asked to be with troops, seeing what they're doing on Memorial Day. I'm pretty sure I can get this on air. Holidays are always slow news days in the States, and it's a great time to remind Americans going to picnics, enjoying the sales, that there are men and women out in the field risking their lives on behalf of their country. If nothing else, I told the guys, I think I can guilt the executive producers into putting us on the air. And I said, all I know is that they'll pick us up, they'll meet us at 8:30 at the green zone, because we reporters, contrary to what you heard, we all lived in the red zone. We were only allowed into the green zone on short forays. So they'll pick us up at 8:30, they'll have us back at noon. And one of the guys said, gosh, in that period of time, they can't even get to one of the dangerous neighborhoods. Absolutely. This is worth it. Paul always used to say, don't risk our lives unless we're going to make air. And, well, we did, but not in the way I had hoped, in the worst kind of way. We met a guy named Captain James Alex Funkhauser that morning from the 4th Infantry Division. And he said, look, I want to show you where in Baghdad we're about to turn a neighborhood over to full Iraqi control. One of those, as they stand up, we stand down stories. But the first thing I want to show you is a place where yesterday a roadside bomb went off. Because the Iraqi security forces get superstitious. They don't want to go back to an area right away where they've been hit. We have to teach them by example to show presence, not to be cowed by the attacks. He said, we also want to talk to the people on that street because they know who planted that bomb. Someone would have seen it. They don't lie to us face to face, eyeball to eyeball. And that's how Paul, James, and I in this 12-man patrol ended up on a dusty Iraqi street, residential area. Just to give you a lay of the land, it was sort of a T-junction. This wide avenue here, where our vehicles were parked, and this cross street here, tall building, and then a whole bunch of bombed out villas. They had been the homes of Saddam loyalists in days past. And at the very corner of this T-junction was a T-stand. So we parked our vehicles, we walked one way, and then we turned around and walked back. And Captain Funkhauser was saying, see those bombed out villas next to us? We think the insurgent cell that operates in this area has moved in there. They could be watching us right now. And they were, though not from the bombed out villas. I was later to find out that they were in a higher position waiting for us all to get close enough. With that, Captain Funkhauser looked ahead and saw that his translator, who we can only call Sam to protect his family, his translator was already engaged with Iraqi men at this T-stand. And these were the people that the captain wanted to talk to. So he completely ignored the fact that there was this network correspondent hanging on his every word and carefully scribbling it all down. He jackrabbited ahead of me towards Sam, the other Iraqis, and the conversation he needed to have with them. His commitment to his mission probably saved my life. As I looked ahead and I saw that Paul and James were in front of us and filming back this way, and I thought, I'll hang back because they're going to get that shot of Captain Funkhauser, who is striding towards these guys in full battle rattle, helmet, flak jacket, weapon. And I can see the Iraqis looking this way, and they're glaring at him. I know what will happen next. He will say, Salamu alaikum, and reach out his hand. And those grimaces will involuntarily transform into the beginnings of smiles. And I want to get that shot. It is about the moment that the captain reached out his arm that the whole world slammed into black. I smelled what smelled like 1,000 matches going off, sulfur. And for a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't open my eyes. I could hear screaming. I could hear people calling for help. You immediately, in those moments, the logic kicks in, and I started thinking, where are Paul and James? Where's my team? What happened? Okay, I must have been hurt. What do I do next? We'd had combat medical training, and I knew from the drills, airway, breathing, circulation. In triage, you don't go to the screaming patient first. You go to the quiet ones, clear their airway, restart their heart. That's since been changed around to lead with circulation because of the situation that I and others were in, but that's another story. Medic Izzy Flores was dealing with his first multiple combat casualty scene. He got to the captain and to Sam. He saw they had both been killed instantly. They couldn't be helped. He got to James. James had also been killed. He got to Paul. Paul had a horrible injury to one of his legs, and Izzy got a tourniquet on him. Izzy got to me just about the time I started saying, help, help, please move me away from the burning car, because I'd remembered this get out clause. If a patient was in immediate danger, then it was a smart thing to move them away from the danger. I had managed to lift my head. I could see a burning car. I didn't know the damage was already done, but I thought, oh wait, okay, burning car, burning in legs, I'm in immediate danger, help, help, help. Izzy heard me yelling for help and said to himself, you're good, and he went to someone else. My big mouth gets me in trouble. Again. What Izzy couldn't see was that my femoral artery was cut and I was bleeding out. The Iowa National Guardsman who eventually did get to me was able to tell me I was the last person waiting for medical aid. And I will forever thank him for that, because that's one of the things I held on to later when I woke up in Bethesda Naval Hospital during the long rehab and realized where I was every morning, see the fluorescent lights, you'd come to, I'm in hospital. I don't know if I'm going to walk properly again. Paul and James are dead. The captain's dead. And all of their families hate me. I never had to ask myself, though, did one of them die? Because I got help first. Now, I woke in Longeville Regional Medical Center with my family around me, mom and dad, and among them my sister from Vietnam and my boyfriend Pete from New Zealand. And everyone says things like, you're going to be fine, you're going to keep your legs. And I'm like, what are all these people talking about? And then Pete says words I hadn't heard him say in 3 years of dating. I love you. And I'm like, oh God, what's wrong with me? So what was wrong with me? I had shrapnel to the brain, which by then had been taken out in a craniotomy. Both eardrums were blown out. Both femurs were broken. My femoral artery had been cut, and I was studded with burning shrapnel from my hips to my ankles. I had first to third degree burns, and a lot of the muscle tissue was just gone. I spent 3.5 months in Bethesda Naval Hospital. Along the way, a doctor had said, you'll probably never walk again properly. That was good information, though I was really angry with him when he told me that so early on, because it lit this fire in me, woke my inner 6-year-old. You think I won't walk properly again? Watch this. And so when the physiotherapist would ask me to do painful things, and if any of you are physiotherapists out there, or any of you have dealt with them, you know they tortured kittens as children. But this works to your advantage later, because they enjoy your pain. So by the time I got out and got back to work, within about 9 months of leaving the hospital, I ran a 10K, and nobody could tell, other than my very slow pace, that there was anything wrong with my legs. So thank you to that doctor. The hard part came next. Being at CBS meant reminding my CBS News family that I was still alive, but Paul and James were lost. When I asked to go back to the war zone, to my old house in Jerusalem and my old job, I didn't understand at first why they were saying no. It took me a while to understand that just as I felt survivor's guilt and grief that I'd had to get through, they felt it too, especially the bosses who didn't want to be responsible for me getting injured again. So I transformed the anger of my initial reaction to their no, we can't let you do that anymore, to, okay, I get it, I understand. The other thing was the US media has done such a great job, myself included, in teaching people that, teaching the American public that people who come back from war zones are traumatized, that is the image that remains. What we haven't been able to teach you is that 80 to 90% of people who go through trauma, including combat, end up stronger and more resilient for the experience if they do the work. So I realized that I had to set an example for my old friends at CBS and for military folks who were watching me. I couldn't give up. I got into this job to speak for those who couldn't. So I called up some old friends and said, do you know of any jobs going? And one did, covering intelligence at the Associated Press. Back to print, which TV correspondents normally don't do. Did I know anything about intelligence? No, but I learned. And over the next 4 years, the past 4 years, I went back to Afghanistan, patrolled with Special Operations Forces. Now, admittedly, I was with a general, and so he was pretty well protected, but I was still outside the wire. Went to Pakistan with the intelligence services there, and met a 4-star general just last year, introduced myself, and he's like, nah, I know who you are. Don't you understand? We're watching you. Every time you take another step, you are setting an example for all of us. You are proving resilience by doing. So that's how I try to live my life, my work, realizing that learning to turn those no's into something positive helps both the people who express those fears and share those original no's, and also helps anyone who comes after me. So my next step is to try to get the American public to see those tales of resilience. So I made the big leap, leaving a great job with the largest news organization in the world to writing the occasional piece for the Daily Beast on the same subjects, but to spending time with special operators and intelligence officers to find out their experiences from the war zone and to publish those anonymous tales so that they understand that there's somebody else going through some of this too, and that there is a way to get through it. Thank you very much.